Hey everyone, tonight we begin with the gritty, sun-scorched world of the Crusades, a chaotic time, where religious passion, rough roads, poor equipment, and questionable choices all came together. Whether you were a knight, a farmer, or just happened to own a donkey, the Crusades were likely to disrupt your weekend. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the content here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always interesting to see where people are tuning in from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some soft background noise, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Imagine this. You've just heard a sermon, loud, emotional, and slightly intimidating, delivered by a man in robes, shouting about sin, salvation, and why Jerusalem is everyone's concern. You're not exactly sure where Jerusalem is, somewhere east of France, south of your farm, but you nod anyway. The Pope has announced that anyone who joins the crusade will be forgiven for all their sins. That sounds like a good deal, especially after what happened last spring behind the mountain. You didn't think anyone noticed, but apparently God keeps track. And honestly, you're bored. You've plowed the same field for over a decade. Your meals are mostly barley, onions, and whatever didn't escape from the stew pot. Someone talks about eternal glory, and that sounds better than milking goats in the rain again. So you sign up, or more accurately, you get pulled in during a tavern conversation that turns into a sacred vow after 3 cups of weak ale and a strong sense of overconfidence. The next morning, you wake up with a headache, holding a wooden cross and someone else's boots. Still, you're proud. You're now officially a crusader. You have a patch on your tunic, a priest's blessing, and the vague idea that this will end with riches and respect. What you don't have: military training, a map, or proper gear. You were told to bring what you could, so you're heading off with a kitchen knife, a frying pan, and whatever pride you have left. Your neighbor Gerald brought a rake and a very aggressive mindset. You tell your family you're leaving in God's name. They ask if God will also be providing your meals. You laugh. You shouldn't have, because now you're part of one of the most unorganized and poorly prepared mass movements in history. You're marching thousands of miles without planning, supplies, or reliable support. You're rerunning more on faith than on common sense. You haven't even left your village yet. What could go wrong? Before you even depart, someone gives you a chainmail shirt that smells like a bad decision. You were promised proper, armachini, noble, heroic. Instead, you get a worn-out iron sweater with rust marks, sweat stains, and the scent of past mistakes. It's heavy, not just a little heavy. We're talking about armor so heavy, it feels like you're wearing a portable blacksmith shop. Just putting it on feels like being hugged by a grumpy anvil. You've also received a helmet cone-shaped, dented, and clearly designed by someone with no love for necks. There's no padding inside, just cold metal and the slow cooking effect on your head. For your legs, you get wool. Just plain wool. Unless you're rich or extremely lucky, you won't have armored greaves. You are neither, so you wrap your legs like a poorly wrapped gift and hope it cushions some of the pain from the thousands of rocks you're about to step on. As for footwear, if you're imagining sturdy boots made of tough leather, forget it. You're wearing old turn shoes, soft leather slippers that barely protect against mud, let alone battle. Within the first mile, you've got a blister, considering starting its own religion. Your sakot, the bright outer garment worn over armor, to show your allegiance used to be white, now it's a vague beige, stained with mystery spots, and flaps like a damp flag when you walk. It features a red cross, painted hastily by a man who also sharpens pigs. There's no uniformity in the army. One man wears full mail, another has a pot on his head, and Gerald again is shirtless with a wooden shield he made himself. It says Jesus. Watch this in poorly written Latin. You try to tie your belt, cinch it too tightly, and nearly pass out. If you manage to borrow a sword, it's likely dull, unbalanced, and feels like it holds a grudge against you. Still, you convince yourself, I look like a knight. You don't. You look like a nervous vegetable wrapped in metal and false hope. But it's too late now. You're packed, dressed, and absolutely not ready. Time to march. The trumpets sound, or maybe someone's just shouting. Either way, the crusade is on the move, and so are you slowly. This isn't a grand cavalry charge. It's a long, painful walk across Europe with thousands of tired, confused people dragging carts, goats, children, and one man determined to bring a piano. Everyone is armed, but not all the weapons are meant for fighting. One man carries a pitchfork, another tied a hammer to a broomstick and calls it God's toothpick. You've barely left the village, and your shoulders already feel cursed. The chainmail scrapes your neck, your shoes are turning your feet into soup, and your pack holding 2 onions, and an old biscuit feels heavier with each step. Someone sneezes behind you. You briefly think about running. Then there's the noise. People are talking, praying, singing. A nobleman rides by and shouts something like "Forward, men," before vanishing for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, you trip over a rock, bruise your pride, and get stepped on by a donkey. The sun is out, it's cheerful. You are not. You are sweating in places you didn't know could sweat. Your thighs are chafing in a way that feels like divine punishment. Your water is already warm and tastes like metal and regret. There are rules, of course, but no one's following them. March in order to let someone's already wandering through a beet field. Ration your food. Jero ate his entire week's supply before lunch. Respect local villagers. You're trying to. They charge half a chicken just to use the well. Then it rains. Just as you're getting used to things, the sky opens up like a sarcastic blessing. Your surcoat clings to you like shame. The roads turn to mudslides. You fall twice, once forward, once backward. A goat laughs. By nightfall, you've walked 12 miles and aged 12 years. You lie down in wet grass next to a stranger who snores like a siege engine. You sleep like a brick in a bucket, badly and with consequences. Only 2,000 miles to go. By day 4, your stomach is singing hymns for food. Loud, desperate ones, the kind usually heard at funerals. You were told the army had supplies. Technically, yes, but they're either moldy, missing, or currently being hoarded by someone named Brother who claims he's fasting for spiritual reasons while chewing suspiciously in the dark. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is a hunk of black bread dense enough to break a wall. You chew it for 20 minutes, get nowhere, and give up. Your teeth are bored. Your companion says his piece has a nail in it. No one is surprised. Lunch is worse because there isn't one. Just the fading memory of lunch. You nibble on some dried peas that taste like despair and old dust. Someone near you pulls out a salted fish he kept in a sock. You politely decline and briefly consider fasting for spiritual reasons. By afternoon, everyone is hungry and irritable. One man claims to see a fig tree at the scarecrow. Another starts licking his sword, saying, "It tastes like glory. It tastes like rust." He now has tetanus. The core issue is that feeding a moving army is, to be accurate, a logistical nightmare. The supply lines are long, disorganized, and often raided by locals who aren't thrilled to give up their food to passing crusaders. So you forage. You find some berries. Gerald says they're safe. Gerald also once ate a candle. You eat them anyway. They are not safe. You spent 2 hours behind a tree, rethinking life. Dinner is stew, hot, confusing stew. No one knows what's in it. Everyone eats it. You find something chewy. You don't ask. Someone says it's rabbit. Someone else says it's boot leather. Either could be right. By nightfall, you're full, but not in a good way. Just full of doubt. You dream of soft bread and cheese that isn't green. You've never missed your mother's onion soup more. And it's only day 4. By now, it's official. You smell awful. Like wet metal, regret, and something possibly hygiene. Once a noble concept is now a distant memory, like clean socks or personal space. You haven't bathed in over a week. Neither has anyone else. You know this because the entire crusade now carries what historians call a strong collective scent. You are one large, moving wheel of sweat, dirt, and medieval body odor. There is no soap. If someone claims they have soap, they're either lying or have carved it out of tallow and wishful thinking. You do get water occasionally, but it's mostly used for drinking or pouring over open wounds while yelling, washing your body with it. That's a luxury reserved for nobles or anyone with far fewer Your clothes, once stitched proudly with a red cross, now look like they've been through a fabric war. Your undergarments have fused to your skin in places. Your boots are damp, possibly alive, and clearly unhappy. Lice. Yes, they've arrived. You've named some. You've tried negotiating. They're winning. One knight insists his helmet is haunted. It's just lice having a celebration. You itch at night, everyone does. It becomes the unofficial marching beat. Scratch, shuffle, groan. You briefly consider bathing in a river then. Realize it's freezing, dirty, and already occupied by someone crying into their You nod in sympathy and walk away. As for bodily functions, there are no toilets. You go where you can. Behind a bush, under a cart, or wherever your dignity gives up. Privacy. Not a chance. You've now shared eye contact during vulnerable moments with people you'll never forget. There's one man, one knows his name, who somehow stays clean. His armor gleams. His face is spotless. He smells like lavender. He might be a miracle, or just a shared hallucination. Other way, you don't like him. You begin dreaming of soap, warm baths, and dry feet, but mostly of a breeze that doesn't smell like 30 men in questionable stew. You're not clean. You're not even close. You're crusade. Clean. You thought your main danger would be swords. Turns out it asked the guy 3 rows behind you who just coughed something ancient into the air. Welcome to the real challenge of the crusade. Surviving your fellow crusaders. Medieval medicine is less science and more guesswork with herbs. If you get sick, there are 3 standard treatments: prayer, bleeding, or being told to walk it off. Spoiler: none of them work, especially when what you vague got is spreading faster than gossip in a month. It always starts small. A sniffle here, a cough there. Someone throws up behind a bush. Everyone pretends not to see it. By the next day, 5 more are coughing. Gerald has a purple rash on his neck and claims it's just heat. You quietly start planning your funeral. Tents turn into sick wards, or, as they're known here, places where hope goes to wheeze. The healers are overwhelmed. Their main tools are bandages, leeches, and optimism. Sometimes they burn herbs. Sometimes they just wave them near your face and hope for the best. The symptoms are obvious: fever, chills, nausea, swelling, and a general feeling like your organs have stopped cooperating. You try to stay calm until you see someone getting treated with a hot poker. Suddenly, you feel fine. Sanitation, let's call it theoretical. Waste goes in random fields. Water is unreliable at best, dangerous at worst. You refill your flask from a stream, only to see 3 horses upstream, treating it like a restroom. You drink anyway. Hydration is hydration. The priests say it's a test from God. The knights blame the devil. The barmaid, who somehow joined the crusade, says it's because no one washes their hands. She's ignored immediately. You try to stay away from the sick until you realize everyone is sick, including you. Your throat burns. Your stomach feels confused. And your last bath was a month ago. Things aren't looking good. And the worst part, you haven't fought anyone yet. You're losing to soup and germs. You've been marching for days hungry and mildly unwilling. Now you're hoping for a warm welcome from the towns along the way. Spoiler: you won't get one. The locals are not happy. In fact, they look at your crusading group the way a shepherd looks at wolves wearing cross tents and ready to hide their animals. From their view, you're a mobile disaster. Thousands of unfamiliar, unwashed people yelling in broken Latin, stomping through fields, borrowing anything loose, and singing war songs at midnight. Like confused spirits, you're not seen as holy warriors. You're seen as a moving disease. You stop at a town hoping to trade for supplies. The gates are locked. The bishop peers from a tower and crosses himself. A monk offers a cabbage in exchange for your quick departure. Language barriers don't help. You try asking for water, but accidentally demand someone's wife. You attempt to explain your sacred mission and end up proposing to a goat. The goat is uninterested. Negotiations end quickly. If you do manage to enter a town, you're met with high prices, long stares, and someone mumbling about how you smell. You buy bread that's older than your boots and ale that could be used as paint thinner. Someone gives directions to Jerusalem. You follow them for 2 days before realizing it was just a polite way to get you to leave. And if you're in foreign lands, it gets worse. The locals don't just avoid you, they want you gone. They don't care about PayPal blessings or your handmade flags. They just want peace, food, and their goats back, especially since many villagers were already looted by earlier crusading groups, who also claimed they were just passing through. Trust is low. In one town, a child throws a turnip at your head at the most accurate throw you've seen all week. You came seeking salvation. They see you as a broke, armed tourist with no boundaries. And honestly, they're not wrong. So you're back on the road headed east. Probably. The truth is, no one really knows where they're going. There are no signs, no GPs. Most in your group think the Holy Land is just past Constantinople, which they also can't find. Your commander has a map sort of. It's a hand-drawn scroll with 3 towns, 2 rivers, and what looks like a dragon in the corner. You suspect the artist was creative and not very accurate. Still, the commander waves it around like divine truth and yells forward. At every fork in the road, confidence seems to matter more than direction. Sometimes, a local guide is recruited given a few coins, a bit of wine, and a promise not to be stepped on. He nods, points east, and disappears before morning. You're starting to think east just means not here. One guy says he remembers the way from a dream. Another read a scroll once. Gerald still shirtless, and now clearly sunburned, says he's following holy whispers on the wind. The wind seems to be saying, "You're lost. You crossed the same stream 3 times in one day. You pass a rock you're sure you've already seen. A monk insists it's a different rock. This one's holier. You're not convinced. The landscape shifts. Constantly forests, swamp, mountains. One stretch of road is so steep, your boots slide more than they grip. Half the army is now moving sideways like confused crabs. Spirits are low, feet are lower. Then someone says, the worst possible thing. I think we took a wrong turn. You're hundreds of miles from home, surrounded by people who think geography is a kind of pastry, and no one wants to admit you're lost, so you keep marching confidently, aimlessly, faithfully. Every direction leads somewhere, whether it's Jerusalem, a Byzantine post, or another goat-filled village, is anyone's guess. But onward you go, driven by holy purpose, stale bread, and a shared refusal to admit you're walking in a large circle. You expected glory. You imagined banners flying, swords clashing with style, and enemies falling in poetic heaps like a troubadour's tale. Instead, you get dirt in your teeth, confusion in your soul, and the unsettling truth that no one really knows what's going on. The first thing you hear is screaming not just from the enemy or your side, but everyone, including you. Their strategy, technically, but it mostly involves shouting charge and hoping the other side is more confused. Spoiler, they're not. Your helmet blocks your vision. Your sword feels too heavy. You try to raise your shield, only to realize it's behind you. Jared borrowed it to cook bacon and forgot to return it. Archers shoot too early. The front line rushes forward. The rear panics and runs back. Someone gets trampled by his own horse. Someone else is swinging a frying pan. You see a man fall, stab his own foot, and curse the devil. Honestly, he might have a point. You run into the chaos because everyone else is doing it, and group pressure is strong. Dust fills the air. You swing your weapon wildly. You hit a helmet it's your own. You scream. It's unintentionally brave. The enemy is quick, skilled, and loud. You lock eyes with one of them, and realize he is about 15 and much more experienced than you. You consider faking your death. You consider making it real. Both sound reasonable. There are horns blowing, commands shouted in 5 languages, and someone singing a tavern song about sheep. It's unclear if this is intimidation or confusion. Either way, it's effective. Eventually, how long? You're not sure. The noise fades. Survivors crawl away, bruised, panting, and smelling like old stew and poor decisions. Somehow, you're still standing, your ankles bleeding, you don't know how. Gerald has your helmet now. He's using it as a soup bowl. So, was it glorious? Not quite, but you're alive, and in the Crusades. That's close enough to a win. The weather in the Holy Land, or more accurately, the long journey to it, is not your ally. It's not even neutral. It's a full-on opponent, with better timing than your entire army. One moment, it's scorching the kind of heat that turns your chainmail into a Castillon oven. You sweat through your clothes, armor, and soul. Your boots start to cook your feet. A nearby knight says he saw a mirage of a tavern. You believe him. You saw it too. You both quietly cry. Then, just when you've accepted your fate as a roast pilgrim, clouds roll in. The sky turns dark, and not a gentle rain, not a light drizzle. This is intense, angry, thunderous rain. Your surcoat sticks to you like a wet rag. Your boots make squishy sounds with each step, like a sad duck. Your tent collapses instantly. You seek shelter under a tree already claimed by 3 wet goats and 1 man reciting psalms to his knees. The road turns to mud. You slip twice. Gerald falls 3 times, once face first, into cow dung. You don't laugh out loud, but your soul does. And then comes the cold. As soon as the sun disappears, the desert becomes unrecognizably frigid. One moment you're sweating, the next you're shivering uncontrollably. Your fingers stop working. Your sword is now an ice sculpture. Your nose decides to leave your face and join another army. You think about starting a fire. You fail. The only thing drier than the wood is your mood. But they say hardship builds character. Unfortunately, character doesn't stop pneumonia while you scrape mud from your eyebrow with a broken spoon. Welcome to crusading. You're not just fighting for faith, you're fighting the sky. And it's winning. You came to fight the infidel. That was the plan. A clear fight. Good versus evil. Christian versus not. Except now, you've noticed something awkward. Half the people on your side can't even agree on which calendar to use, let alone which heresy is worst. You're from Western Europe, Latin speaking. Now you're meeting business. They speak Greek, cross themselves differently, and look at you like a suspicious cat. They're supposed to be your allies. In practice, they've locked the gates and are watching you from the walls with archers. Your priest says the Eastern Church is heretical. The Byzantine bishop calls you a sinful goat farmer. You both smile politely and whisper spiritual insults. Then there are the local Christian Arabs, Armenian Christians, Syriac Christians. You thought everyone here was Muslim. Surprise! Now you're retrying to tell friend from enemy, based on how they say the Lord's Prayer. You're bad at it. You threaten a group of monks by mistake. They burn your tent in response. And the Muslims, also not one unified army. There are Fatimids, Seljuks, and local rulers often more interested in fighting each other than you. Sometimes your enemy becomes an ally. Someone you were chasing last week is now sharing your campfire and explaining regional politics over your last onion. Your commander attempts a meeting to unify everyone. It ends with a loud debate over which saint is best. Gerald suggests a duel. No one disagrees. Internal conflict grows. Knights argue with priests. Nobles fight over loot. Peasants start their own prayer group. One guy claims he saw the Virgin Mary in a chicken coop and forms a new sect. They charge the wrong hill. Religious unity lasted about 3 days. Now you're mostly hoping no one stabs you over a disagreement about Lent. God may be on your side, but everyone else is on edge. You thought joining the crusade meant marching with noble warriors, disciplined knights, and devout holy men. Instead, You're walking beside the strangest group ever gathered outside a tavern brawl. To your left is a baker with no teeth and a rolling pin instead of a weapon. To your right is a man named Tebow, who claims he's a monk despite constant swearing, drinking from anything with a spout, and definitely stabbing someone over a loaf of bread. Gerald Still shirtless has painted a cross on his chest in soot and calls himself Goddess Muscle. Your commander is a 19-year-old noble with perfect hair and no idea what he's doing. He thinks strategy means pointing dramatically and yelling. In one battle, he charged the wrong way and ended up in a cabbage patch. He insists it was part of the plan. Then there are the true believers fanatics who think they're invincible because God favors them. They go into battle without shirts, shoes, or sometimes even swords. Just blind faith and a big stick. Their survival rate is low. And finally, there's a merchant trailing the army, selling holy relics of questionable origin. He offers you the thumb of St. Peter one day, and the official Crusader toothpick. The next both are clearly twigs. There's also a group of children. Yes, actual children. No one knows where they came from or who invited them, but they've been marching for weeks and somehow have better morale than the rest of the group. At night, the camp is filled with singing, scripture debates, and arguments over stolen bread crusts. One man has declared himself bishop of the tents and now delivers daily sermons from a barrel. His theology is questionable. His balance is worse. The only thing holding this crowd together is shared discomfort and a vague, increasingly confused idea of reaching somewhere sacred without dying. You're not sure who's more unwell, your enemies, or the man next to you, who's turned a soup ladle into a spear. What's clear is this: you're not in good company. You're in strange company, and strange company tends to get lost together. At last, you've reached your destination, or at least a city important enough to attack. The walls are tall and thick, and the people inside clearly don't want you there. Naturally, the order is given. Lay siege. It sounds noble in theory. In practice, it's more like medieval camping with weapons and significantly more stomach issues. Your army sets up camp just beyond arrow range, hopefully, and prepares for what could last days, weeks, or indefinitely. The plan is to wait them out. Unfortunately, no one brought food, proper hygiene plans, siege equipment, or anything particularly helpful. Someone tries to build a catapult. It falls apart. A battering ram is made, using a tree for ropes and pure enthusiasm. It lasts 10 minutes before the defenders burn it down clearly. They're more prepared. You dig trenches. You build towers. Mostly, you complain. Meanwhile, the people inside the walls are doing just fine, waving from the ramparts, eating olives, and occasionally tossing insults or waste in your direction. It rains. Everything turns to mud. Your socks fall apart. Your tent leaks. The stew tastes like rope and disappointment. Gerald catches a rat and names it dinner. Morale hits a new low, especially after someone tried to play a lute, and it sounded like a goat drowning. And then there's the smell. Thousands of unwashed soldiers, spoiled food, and the occasional dead horse. It's the kind of odor that could strip paint off a relic. The local priest calls it a test of faith. You call it a health hazard. Eventually, the assault begins. Ladders go up. Arrows come down. You climb 2 steps, scream, fall, and land on someone who is about to surrender anyway. The attack fails. Everyone pretends it was just to test their defenses. Weeks drag on. Supplies drop. Tensions rise. Someone suggests eating the mascot goat. A fight breaks out. The goat wins. You come to understand that sieges aren't about action there, about boredom, bad smells, and struggling to recall why you came here at all. Then one morning, as the sun rises with slightly more flair than usual, a sound echoes through camp. The gates are open. Whether by starvation, betrayal, or divine timing, the walls are finally breached. You expect trumpets, glory, maybe angelic singing. Instead, it's chaos. The charge into the city resembles less of a victory march and more of a stampede by tired, overheated people with weapons and a grudge against architecture. You run forward, sword ready, and trip on rubble. Someone steps on your back. You thank them out of habit. Inside the city, smoke and confusion. No one can tell who's who. People are looting, yelling, or dramatically collapsing. A knight gallops past holding a chandelier. Gerald has found a barrel of wine and now calls himself lord of the alleyway. You lose your footing, your helmet, and briefly your temper with a particularly stubborn door. You were told this was a holy war. It looks more like a chaotic yard sale. There's no clear leadership. Your noble commander is too busy striking heroic poses for imaginary paintings. The priests are shouting Deus Vult while hiding relics in their robes. Someone claims they've found the Holy Grail. It's clearly a dented soup bowl. Eventually, the city is secured, which means it's mostly looted, partially burning, and filled with confusion. You stand in the rubble and ask yourself, was this the plan? You find a relic, maybe a toe bone. Might be sacred, might be chicken. You keep it anyway. You also now own a goblet, a tapestry too large to carry, and someone's very confused cat. But the feeling of triumph is missing. You expected righteousness, honor. What you feel is exhaustion, stickiness, and a vague sense of guilt. You're surrounded by frightened civilians and shattered buildings, trying to remember if this was about faith or just spoils. A priest puts a hand on your shoulder and says, God is pleased. You nod, but you're not sure. You came seeking heaven. You got ash, noise, and Gerald vomiting on a relic. You survive. Marching, hunger, sickness, arrows, Gerald, and the occasional divine mix. You technically won. Now, you're sitting on a broken crate in a city you helped ruin, trying to recall what life was like before you joined this so-called holy warren by amateurs with swords and untreated illnesses. You've changed, not in the I've grown kind of way, more in the dirtier, thinner, permanently confused kind of way. You feel older and younger all at once, aged 15 years inside, but still getting scolded by someone whose only authority is a fancier hat. You flinch whenever someone says pilgrimage. Your armor no longer fits properly. Your body has reshaped itself around every bruise, and every night spent curled up like a damp pretzel in a leaky tent. Your sword is chipped, your beliefs complicated. Once you thought in absolutes good and evil, saved and lost. Now, you mostly believe in solid shoes and not eating anything that still moves. Back home awaits. They'll call you a hero. They'll ask what it was like. You'll smile and say incredible because chaotic, morally unclear, and constantly wet doesn't work well in a tavern story. You might even polish the relics you took, hang 'em up, and pretend you knew what you were doing the whole time. You'll nod quietly during sermons and avoid making eye contact with goats. But deep down, you'll always know the truth. You didn't crusade, you just made it through a moving disaster with a cross on top. Gerald will write bad poetry. Someone will start a cult. You will donate quietly to a nearby monastery. And never mention the time you mistook a bishop's hat for a stew pot. Was it worth it? History will say yes. You might agree, but the twitch in your left eye still says probably not. The Holy Land is behind you, so is most of your sanity. Long before samurai trained with katanas or gladiators fought in Roman arenas, two young Egyptian men circled each other in desert sand, arms raised, knees bent, feet steady. One faked a move. The other lunged. No swords, no armor, just skill, strength, and the roar of a crowd under the burning sun. Welcome to ancient Egyptian wrestling, the earliest recorded martial art in human history. More than 4,000 years ago, long before MMA gyms or Olympic medals, people along the Nile were already refining hand-to-hand combat. Inside a Middle Kingdom tomb at Beni Hassan, archaeologists found wall art showing over 400 different wrestling holds, locks, and throws etched into stone. This wasn't wild fighting, it was a precise system of physical control and mental strategy. Wrestling in Egypt wasn't just a sport, it was status. Boys trained from early childhood. Machas were common in both military exercises and public celebrations. Soldiers grappled to stay sharp. Nobles competed to show strength. Even pharaohs were said to wrestle not out of need, but to display divine energy. The techniques themselves are surprisingly modern: shoulder throws, hip tosses. Anyone familiar with judo or wrestling today would recognize them. This wasn't a forgotten pastime. It was a refined tradition, laying the groundwork for martial arts that followed. Unlike later styles combining weapons and philosophy, Egyptian wrestling was pure, just a human body trained to overpower another. Still, it had a spiritual side. Ancient texts and temple carvings link wrestling to the gods, especially Horus, who battled Set in a cosmic conflict. Each match symbolized that struggle: order versus chaos, discipline against disorder. These weren't just physical contests, they were rituals, harsh yet graceful, representing cosmic balance. Through this, Egypt became the unexpected origin of structured martial tradition. Before monks meditated or warriors shouted battle chants, Egyptians fought silently in the sand. With Narration changed the world forever. If Egyptian wrestlers fought for honor, Roman gladiators fought to survive. Their arena wasn't a courtyard, but a massive stone colosseum filled with shouts from thousands of spectators. Behind every victorious gladiator stood something even tougher: the ludus Rome's gladiator school, where martial arts met military discipline. To Roman eyes, violence wasn't just entertainment, it was politics, power, and performance. Gladiators weren't just brawlers. They were trained, classified, and developed like weapons. Each fought in a specific style with set techniques based on their armor and combat role. The retiarius used a net and trident, focusing on speed and entanglement. The secutor carried a short sword and large shield built to chase and overpower. Every move was taught, every weakness was analyzed. At the center were the Lannister harsh instructors, who ran the Ludi-like extreme training camps. Most gladiators were slaves or captured enemies. They went through grueling routines, strength drills, sparring, practice, battles with wooden weapons. Their bodies became tools not for war, but for the arena's bloody sand. And make no mistake, this was martial arts. The gladius, the short stabbing sword from which gladiator comes, was shaped by centuries of Roman military strategy. Fighters learned angles, footwork, timing, and distance control. They read opponents' breathing, learned to fake, and struck when least expected. Their aim wasn't just to win, but to captivate the crowd. Still, it wasn't all brutal. Some gladiators became famous. Spartacus, a former soldier turned rebel, escaped the ludus at Capua and nearly defeated Rome. Others won their freedom and became well known, admired for their skills, and celebrated like athletes. Roman martial training was harsh but methodical. It broke men down, then rebuilt them into fighters whose survival depended on discipline, precision, and endurance. It wasn't sport, it was a performance. Every arena was a stage where martial tradition was carved into sweat, sand, and blood. Long before Kung Fu amazed the world or judo joined the Olympics, a martial tradition thrived in the lush south of India. It was called Kalera Patu, not just a combat system, but a sacred practice, a warrior's yoga, and a living art passed through generations, often called the mother of all martial arts. Kalera Patu is over 3,000 years old. Legends connect it to the sage Parashurama, a warrior saint who, myth says, created Kerala by reclaiming land from the sea. Legend aside, Kalera Patu is one of the oldest surviving martial systems and possibly one of the most refined. Where Roman training focused on brute strength, Kalera Patu valued movement, flow, and spiritual alignment. Training started in the Kalaria sunken dirt hall that served as both gym and temple. Here, barefoot students learned animal-based movements: the horse's stance, the lion's leap, the snake's strike. Each motion was linked to breath, energy, and rhythm. Before touching a weapon, students spent years mastering body control, kicks, and open-hand strikes. Then came the weapon Zilong, with a striking beauty. The urumi, a flexible whip sword that wraps around the body, is one of the most feared and graceful tools in It's also the most poetic one mistake, and the wielder can injure themselves. To master it, one needed full concentration, steady breath, and years of strict training. But what set Kalarippayattu apart wasn't just its weapons, it was its philosophy. Fighters were trained in Ayurveda, the traditional Indian medical system, to heal the injuries they caused. They studied marmam, pressure points believed to control life energy. The goal wasn't destruction, but balance. Even in combat, the art stressed restraint, timing, and inner qualities of a warrior sage, not a mere fighter. By the time colonial powers arrived, Kalarippayattu had become a symbol of local resistance. The British bandit, fearing rebellion, forced underground for years. The art never disappeared. Like the flexible urumi sword, it coiled in silence, waiting to return fluid, powerful, and enduring. Kalarippayattu wasn't only a fighting method, it was a living philosophy of graceful combat, a tribute to life. Now picture a misty temple deep in the mountains of Henan, China. A bald monk stands in still meditation, surrounded by candles. Then, with a breath, he bursts into action, slicing through the air, body moving in flowing strikes. This is Shaolin Kung Fu, where martial arts became a spiritual journey and fighting became a form of prayer. Shaolin martial traditions date back to the 5th century CE, when Indian monk Bodhidharma came to the temple. Legend says he found the monks physically unfit for long meditation. So, he taught them exercises, part physical training, part self-defense, that later evolved into Shaolin Kung Fu. But this wasn't just about strength. At Shaolin, every move had meaning and purpose. Body and mind worked together. A punch was an act of clarity. A block redirected energy. Zen Buddhism promoted detachment in battle. Fighting in anger meant failure. True mastery involved self-control. Training was intense. Monks held stances until their legs shook, struck trees to harden their limbs, and balanced on poles to sharpen focus. They copied animals, tiger, crane, snake, leopard, and dragon, each with its own rhythm and strategy. The tiger overpowered, the crane dodged, the snake moved smoothly, and the dragon adapted. Weapons training was just as demanding. Staffs, swords, spears, and chains were common. The gun staff, known as the grandfather of all weapons, was iconic. Monks were taught to turn even farming tools into defense weapons. Why? Because Shaolin Kung Fu wasn't created to conquer, but to protect the temple, people, and spirit. Over time, Shaolin monks became legendary. They fought off bandits, resisted invasions, and inspired uprisings. Their skill made them both respected and targeted. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, emperors alternated between supporting and suppressing them. Despite temple burnings and political attacks, the Shaolin legacy survived. It crossed borders, influencing Japanese karate, Korean taekwondo, and eventually global culture. From Bruce Lee to Hollywood, its legacy continues. Shaolin Kung Fu wasn't just combated, was enlightenment in motion. A disciplined art of balance and will. Asterisk in feudal Japan. Martial arts were more than battle, they were a way of life for the samurai. Central to their code was Bushido, the way of the warrior. It wasn't a fighting style, but a guiding philosophy for every move and decision. Samurai weren't just fighters, they were disciplined symbols of loyalty and precision. Training began early, sometimes at age 5. The heart of their practice was kenjutsu, the sword art. The katana wasn't just a tool. It was considered the samurai's soul, sharp, balanced, and elegant. Every motion, from drawing to striking to sheathing the sword, followed a precise ritual. Besides kenjutsu, samurai learned jujitsu, grappling without weapons, and gejitsu, archery. Mastery of multiple skills wasn't just for battle, it was for personal growth. They meditated to develop zankin, a state of constant awareness. In a duel, hesitation meant death. Calmness under pressure was essential. But perhaps the most striking part of samurai martial culture was its emotional depth. Bushido demanded honor, even in loss. A warrior was taught to accept death calmly. If disgraced, a samurai might perform seppuku ritual suicide to restore honor. Harsh, but in their world, dignity came before life. During long peace periods, especially the Tokugawa era, martial skills became more philosophical. Sword schools focused on posture, awareness, and mental clarity instead of strength. The greatest masters, like Miyamoto Musashi, combined sword technique with Zen thinking. His work, The Book of Five Rings, is still a key martial arts text. Though the samurai era passed, their traditions lived on. They transformed into modern arts like kendo and aikido, and even shaped business practices in Japan. The samurai spirit is still present in martial arts schools, in books and films, and in the quiet discipline of those who follow the warrior path. For the samurai, martial arts weren't just about winning, they were about earning the right to carry the sword. When people think of martial arts, they often focus on Asia or ancient Europe, but across Africa, powerful and diverse warrior traditions thrived, deeply rooted in culture and often overlooked. In Ethiopia, the Morsi and Suri tribes practiced danga, or stick fighting. It was a fierce but organized form of dueling. Warriors used long, polished sticks in matches that could end in serious injury. But these weren't random. Danga was a rite of passage, a test of strength, bravery, and even a way to win respect or court a partner. Further south, in Zulu territory, martial skill was central to identity. In the early 1800s, Shaka, Zulu transformed traditional stick fighting, known as nduku, into military training. He replaced throwing spears with short stabbing ones and trained warriors in formations, tactics, and coordinated movement. Their footwork and teamwork rivaled the discipline of Roman soldiers. But African martial arts weren't just about battle, they were deeply tied to tradition. In Angola, Ngolo was a flowing, dance-based combat style, with spinning kicks and evasive moves. It looked like a choreographed fight, blending beauty with technique. It didn't stay in Angola. Enslaved people brought Ngolo to the Americas, where it evolved into capoeira dance fight, hybrid now practiced worldwide. Africans carried Ngolo across the Atlantic, where it developed into capoeira. In Brazil, one of the world's most distinctive martial arts. Across Africa, warriors also used rhythm, music, and performance in their training. War dances served two purposes: to intimidate opponents and to energize the body. Movements often mirrored animals, ancestral spirits, or natural forces. Combat wasn't just physical, it was a connection to heritage, identity, and spirituality. Though many of these practices were restricted during colonial rule, they were never fully lost. Today, across rural villages and modern training centers, these martial traditions are gradually returning, not just as combat systems, but as cultural legacies. African martial arts remind us that the path of a warrior is shaped not by fame, but by resilience, community, and memory. When people think of Vikings, they often imagine horned helmets, historically inaccurate wild beards, and chaotic raids. But behind the myths was a highly structured system of training based on survival, discipline, and harsh efficiency. The Norse were more than raiders. They were skilled warriors with a deep respect for combat and a belief system that honored death in battle. Viking martial training didn't happen in formal schools or temples. It took place in longhouses, open fields, and icy battlegrounds. Boys were raised with a single goal: to become strong enough to protect their clan, claim new lands, and earn a legacy. Training began early, with wooden weapons, before progressing to real arms. Their main weapons were the sword, axe, and spear. While short swords worked well in close quarters, it was the bearded axe, heavy, adaptable, and feared, that became their signature tool. Vikings trained to break shield formations, disarm enemies, and strike with precision. Their methods weren't decorative, each move aimed to end a fight quickly. Yet Viking combat was far from chaotic. It was tactical, often involving coordinated shield walls, feints, and calculated strikes to outmaneuver enemies. They also practiced holmgang, a formal duel used to resolve disputes. These battles weren't just about strength, they tested control, courage, and skill. Norse martial training was closely tied to mythology. Warriors believed Odin, the god of wisdom and war, watched over their fights. The berserkers, known for entering frenzied states in battle, were said to draw power from animals like bears, wolves, or boars through ritual and possibly altered states. Whether myth or truth, the berserker story shows the spiritual aspect of Viking warfare. So did the belief in Valhalla, the warrior's afterlife. Dying bravely in battle promised eternal reward. This idea didn't just glorify fighting, it shaped how they fought. Fearless, relentless, and committed. To retreat meant losing not just a battle, but paradise. Though Viking methods weren't well documented, their legacy continues through reenactments and historical combat groups. Vikings were not savages. They were strategic craftsmen of war, forging victory with precision, belief, and strength. In ancient Persia, under the domed roofs of the Zerkani, or House of Strength, warriors trained not just to fight, but to live rightly. This space united martial arts, spirituality, and national identity into one of the world's oldest ongoing warrior traditions. Varzashi Palavani, the Persian martial art, traces its roots back over 2,000 years to the Achaemenid and Sassanid empires. At its center is Palavani, a system blending strength training, wrestling, and combat routines with ethical and spiritual teachings. The word Palavan meant more than champion. It described a noble fighter who protected the weak and stood for justice. Training happened in the Zerkane, a sacred gym where rituals held as much weight as workouts. Barefoot and bare-chested, practitioners performed sequences to drum rhythms and the voice of the Morsht, a spiritual coach and singer. Exercises included swinging wooden clubs, meals, lifting heavy shields, and rotating iron bows aimed at building strength, balance, and agility. Think of it as ancient strength training mixed with song and ceremony. The heart of the practice was Kashti Palavani, traditional Persian wrestling. Unlike modern competitive wrestling, this was both a sport and a rite of passage. Matches were demanding and technical, focused on throws and leverage. Humility was essential. Winning wasn't enough. Rhea Palavan showed respect in victory and grace in defeat. The philosophy of Palavani drew from Sufism and Zoroastrianism, encouraging fighters to cleanse both body and soul. Strength without humility was seen as weakness. Winning without compassion was dishonor. In this way, the Zerkani was more than a gym, it was a place of moral development. During foreign rule, especially under Arab and Mongol invasions, the Zerkani became a quiet center of resistance. Persian culture and identity were preserved through sweat, song, and training. Martial practice became a symbol of resilience. Today, Varzashi Palavani is officially recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage. Modern practitioners may wear track suits instead of traditional clothing, but the values remain. In Persian tradition, the strongest warrior wasn't the one who hit hardest, but the one who trained with purpose, lived with integrity, and lifted others along the way. From the ancient tombs of Egypt to the mountaintop temples of China, from the cold fjords of Scandinavia to the sunlit sarkanas of Iran, martial arts were never just about fighting. They were guides for how to live, how to face death, and how to move through life with purpose. Though empires have fallen and swords have rusted, the echoes of these systems still shape the world today. In modern MMA gyms, we see these legacies play out. Wrestlers use takedown techniques similar to those practiced in ancient Egypt. Striking coaches teach spinning kicks, reminiscent of fighters train with intensity once seen in gladiators and samurai. The surface may have changed, but the principles remain. Discipline, timing, and balance, values as old as civilization. Beyond the arena, martial arts have become a global language. In schools, dojos, and community centers, from Tokyo to New York, millions practice karate, taekwondo, kung fu, and capoeira, not just to fight, but to build confidence, focus, and community. What began as rituals of war have evolved into tools for healing, meditation, and even cultural exchange. Many traditional systems have also seen revival. Indigenous African arts, like Ngolo and Donga, are being preserved by researchers and practitioners determined to protect their heritage. In India, Kalaripayattu is experiencing renewed interest, with ancient forms now blending into modern fitness. Shaolin monks travel the world, demonstrating skills that once protected temples from invasion. But perhaps the most enduring lesson of martial arts is their philosophy. Strength must come with humility. Winning means nothing without virtue. And often, the true opponent is ourselves, in a world drawn to speed and spectacle. These traditions ask us to slow down, breathe, and train with intention. Technology may have changed how battles are fought with drones, firearms, and machines, but it hasn't changed why we train. The urge to master the body, calm the mind, and follow the warrior's path remains universal. So whether you're sparring, at the gym, shadowboxing, in your living room, or simply facing life's daily challenges, know this: you're part of a tradition older than kings, deeper than empires, and stronger than steel. The art continues, because the warrior never truly disappears. In ancient Egypt, beauty wasn't seen as vanity, was considered a form of virtue. Egyptians believed physical appearance reflected inner harmony, and to look beautiful was to align with Ma'at, the cosmic order. Cleanliness, fragrance, and decoration weren't optional, they were spiritual responsibilities. Every morning, both men and women followed detailed routines of grooming and self-care. Under the harsh desert sun and the humid air of the Nile, they used ointments made from animal fats, beeswax, and oils. These not only kept the skin soft, but also served as protection from weather and illness. The balms were often scented with myrrh, frankincense, or lotus scents, thought to please the gods. Perfume wasn't reserved for the living. It was also applied to the dead, intended to ease the soul's journey into the afterlife. No beauty routine was complete without kohl, the famous black eyeliner made from galena, a powdered lead-based mineral blended with oils or fat. Kohl wasn't just for appearance. It protected the eyes from sunlight and was believed to ward off evil. Its use created the almond-shaped gaze we see in temple carvings and royal artwork. From Cleopatra to Tutankhamun, colors and cosmetics held meaning. Green eyeshadow made from malachite symbolized rebirth and was tied to the god Horus. Red ochre was used on lips and cheeks to convey energy, happiness, and the spirit of Hathor, the goddess of love and beauty. Asterisk wigs were more than fashion, they were hygienic. Shaved heads stayed cool beneath carefully made wigs of human hair, beads, and gold. Beauty also reflected social status. The wealthier someone was, the more detailed their cosmetic tools. The elite stored perfumes in alabaster or faience jars, while commoners used clay. Scented wax cones were worn on wigs at banquets, slowly melting to release pleasant aromas through the night, a blend of cleanliness, allure, and luxury. For the Egyptians, beauty was eternal. You didn't just present yourself for the world of the living, you prepared for the afterlife. Even the dead were expected to appear divine. Asterisk in ancient Greece, beauty was closely tied to philosophy. The Greeks believed outer beauty reflected moral goodness. To be beautiful was to be kalos, kagathos, both noble and virtuous. Sculptors didn't idealize gods for flattery, but to show mortals what perfection looked like. This same balance and harmony influenced grooming. For Greek women, fair skin was the ideal. It signified purity, high status, and a life away from outdoor labor. To achieve this, they applied white lead, smithion, a natural clay, chalk, or even crushed pearls. The goal wasn't vanity, but to signal one's social standing. Cheeks and lips were colored with natural pigments from red ochre, berries, or madder root. Rouge gave the impression of youth and vitality. Lip color, while subtle, suggested charm without defying modesty. Greek beauty favored balance. A little color was tasteful, too much was improper. Eyes were defined using soot or charcoal, not as bold as Egyptian kohl. but enough to shape the eyes with a soft shadow. Eyebrows were ideally joined. A unibrow was considered a sign of intelligence and purity. Women sometimes filled in the gap with powder or painted it using kohl. Hair care was also important. Women lightened their hair with vinegar and sunlight, or used saffron for golden tones. Blonde hair was linked to gods and heroes. Hairstyles included braids and buns, often decorated with ribbons or gold ornaments. Men preferred styled beards and neat curls, a mix of toughness and refinement. Greek cosmetics were discreet and functional, designed to enhance natural features without appearing artificial. In public, women were expected to be modest, but in private gatherings and festivals, beauty became a quieter form of attraction. In Greece, to be beautiful wasn't to stand out, but to reflect the balanced, refined image of the gods. In ancient Rome, beauty was both a display and a tool. Unlike the Greeks' restrained approach, Romans embraced cosmetics with flair, from the wives of emperors to courtesans and ambitious servants. Appearance was power, and everyone knew it. A clear, pale complexion was the Roman beauty standard. It showed wealth and a life lived indoors. To achieve it, Roman women used whitening agents like white lead, chalk, and even crocodile dung mixed with vinegar. Some added powdered horn or oyster shells for extra brightness. The wealthy used face masks made from honey, barley, or milk, and shared recipes as social currency. Rouge and lip color were widely used. Red ochre, cinnabar, and mulberry juice gave cheeks and lips a rich tone, often layered for a bolder effect. Roman women didn't shy away from color, though the line between elegant and excessive was a common topic in literature and gossip. Eye makeup was dramatic. Lashes and lids were darkened with soot, antimony, or even burnt rose petals. Eyeliner created almond-shaped eyes like those in Egypt, while eyeshadow came in green, blue, and brown. Eyebrows were carefully shaped, darkened with burnt cork or ash, and plucked with tweezers often stored with a woman's mirror. Perfume, however, was Rome's greatest obsession. The wealthy layered scents rose, cinnamon, myrrh, spikenard, into their clothing, rooms, and hair. Oils came in jars from Egypt, Syria, and Arabia. Scent became personal branding, even among men. Wigs and hairpieces formed a booming market. Blonde wigs, often made from enslaved Germanic women's hair, were especially sought after. Hairstyles featured complex waves and high stacks, held by pins made of ivory, silver, or gold. Professional hairdressers, known as ornatresses, were a staple in wealthy homes. In Rome, cosmetics were more than beauty. They were ambition and identity. Every brushstroke, scent, and braid was a public statement of status and intent. In ancient Mesopotamia, cities like Babylon and Nineveh, beauty was tied to magic, medicine, and divinity. Here, in one of the world's earliest civilizations, cosmetics were more than adornment. They were used to attract good fortune, express faith, and aid in transformation rituals. Men and women alike cared deeply about grooming. Scented oils and balms were key to daily life, not only for moisturizing skin in a dry climate, but for aligning with divine forces. Oils made from sesame, almonds, or olives were often infused with myrrh, cedar wood, or frankincense. Eyes were the center of beauty, as in Egypt. Kohl was applied to lashes and lids, not just for aesthetics, but to repel evil and disease. Mixtures of charcoal, lead, and crushed minerals were stored in small stone jars. The distinct eye shapes seen in Mesopotamian sculptures weren't exaggerations. They reflected real beauty practices. That skincare was also advanced. Recipes for face creams used crushed date stones, beeswax, and milk to brighten the skin. Clay masks treated blemishes, while salt or ash scrubs exfoliated it. Records on clay tablets show that grooming advice was common among elites. Early examples of beauty blending science and belief. Hair was styled with detail and care, often reflecting social or spiritual identity. Women applied oil to their hair to keep it smooth and manageable, often braiding it into detailed styles or twisting it into buns decorated with ribbons. beads, or bronze pins. While wigs were less common than in Egypt, hairpieces and false braids were sometimes used to add volume or display wealth. What stands out most is the connection between beauty and magic. In Mesopotamia, incantations often mentioned beautification. Spells even included instructions for applying specific oils or pigments to attract love or divine favor. Cosmetic rituals were sometimes led by temple priests or priestesses, especially those who served Ishtar, the goddess of beauty, love, and war. In ancient Mesopotamia, beauty was a form of enchantment. Every cosmetic act was a ritual. Every glance in the mirror was seen as a silent conversation with the divine dot. In the ancient cities of the Indus Valley, Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Lotho beauty left its mark not through texts but through artifacts, terracotta tools, fine mirrors, and faint traces of powdered pigments. Though their script remains undeciphered, the cosmetic practices of the Indus Valley are revealed through objects, subtle, personal, and refined. Among the ruins, archaeologists have found polished bronze, mirrors, carved combs, and small terracotta palettes, still holding hints of red pigment. These were not just decorative, they were practical tools of daily grooming, pointing to a culture where personal care held lasting value. One of the most significant finds is the widespread use of red pigment, likely made from hematite or iron oxide, used on lips, cheeks, or the forehead. This rouge may have held meaning beyond beauty, perhaps representing fertility, spiritual devotion, or marital status, similar to the Bindi and later Indian traditions. The color red, sacred and powerful, has remained central to South Asian aesthetics since ancient times. Bathing was also a shared ritual. The famous Great Bath at Mohenjo-Daro, with its brick-lined steps and surrounding rooms, points to a community that prioritized cleanliness, not only for health, but as part of spiritual purity. Oils scented with local herbs like turmeric or vetiver were likely applied before and after bathing to soften skin and soothe the mind. Hair was carefully styled, usually oiled, and arranged into buns or braids. Figurines from the time show women with detailed hairstyles decorated with ornaments. Some researchers believe the people of the Indus Valley used natural dyes like indigo or henna to color hair or decorate the body. Early forms of traditions still seen in South Asia today. Though written records are rare, plant remains suggest the use of aromatic herbs and resins. Incense burners found in homes and temples indicate how scent blended with ritual and daily life. In the Indus Valley, grooming and fragrance weren't separate from spirituality, they were woven into it. Cosmetics were quiet symbols of identity, balance, and perhaps affection. Beauty here was thoughtful, understated, and enduring. In ancient China, beauty mirrored nature, delicate, balanced, and full of meaning. To be beautiful was to reflect the stillness of a plum blossom, the purity of jade, or the elegance of a crane in flight. From the Han to the Tang dynasties, Chinese beauty practices developed into refined rituals and art painted onto the body. Pale skin was the foundation of the Chinese beauty ideal. As in other ancient societies, fair skin showed status and refinement, proof that a person did not labor under the sun. Women used rice powder to lighten their faces, sometimes blending it with pearl dust or powdered lead. Unaware of the risks, blush was used lightly, not in bold strokes, but soft dabs resembling flower petals. This technique, known as fadian or flying dots, became especially popular during the Tang dynasty. Women would also paint small red shapes on their cheeks or foreheads, inspired by flowers or the glow of emotion. Lips were another focal point. Red cinnabar pigment was used to color the lips into a small heart-like shape, leaving the outer edges pale. The contrast created an effect of elegance and restraint, a quiet suggestion of emotion rather than an overt display. Eyebrows were seen as an art form. Shapes varied over time, straight-arched or curved like a swallow's wings. Women often shaved their natural brows and redrew them with charcoal or black ink. Manuals from the Timpson Song dynasties listed dozens of brow styles, each with poetic names like willow leaf or distant mountains. Ornamental details took beauty further. Bodyarn, tiny floral or jeweled dots worn on the forehead, were made from gold leaf, paper, or crushed flower petals. These marks symbolized youth, wealth, or seasonal celebration. Perfume and skincare were just as important. Scented oils infused with orchid, lotus, or musk were massaged into the skin. Herbal face masks with ingredients like ginseng or green tea were used to maintain a clear, youthful appearance. In China, beauty was not just cosmetic, it was medicinal, moral, and philosophical. To be beautiful was to live in harmony with heaven and earth. A poem written in color, scent, and movement. In ancient Mesoamerica, among the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec civilizations, beauty was bold, ceremonial, and deeply spiritual. Unlike in some other ancient cultures. While cosmetics were mostly reserved for elite women in Mesoamerica, both men and women decorated their bodies with purpose. Appearance wasn't just for attraction, it reflected identity, ritual, and cosmic beliefs. The Mesoamerican color palette came from nature. Red was the most sacred color, representing life, blood, and the sun. Women tinted their lips using aotite seeds, creating a deep red tone, while cheeks were colored with crushed cochineal, a vibrant red dye from insects on cactus. Black and white were used for contrast. Charcoal and powdered lime helped define facial features or outline the eyes. Body painting was common and deeply ritualistic. Natural dyes and mineral pigments were applied during festivals, battles, or religious events. Warriors painted their faces to intimidate enemies and honor the gods. Priests used ash or chalk to purify themselves for sacrifices or ceremonies. Young women wore faint facial marks during courtship to signal readiness for marriage. Fragrance had spiritual meaning. The Aztecs had a strong connection to flowers like xitl, using them in both offerings and personal decoration. Scented flowers such as marigolds, plumeria, and cacao blooms were woven into garlands or crushed into fragrant pastes for the skin. Copal, a sacred tree resin, was burned as incense and mixed with oils to scent the body before ceremonies. Hairstyles also carried symbolic weight. Maya women wore long braids coiled into buns or wrapped atop their heads, often decorated with jade beads or feathers. Aztec noblewomen used ribbons, hairpieces, and even gold dust to enhance their looks. Men, especially warriors, styled their hair to show rank, using shaved designs or elaborate knots to reflect courage in battle. Tattooing and scarification were practiced too, especially by the Maya. These marks weren't simply decorative. They symbolized endurance, devotion, or spiritual change. Dental cosmetics also existed. Elite individuals embedded jade or turquoise into their teeth to show status and divine favor. To Mesoamericans, beauty was sacred. Every pigment, flower, and hairstyle was a symbol, a link between the physical world and the divine. In the misty forests and wind-swept highlands of ancient Europe, the Celts embraced a form of beauty that was raw and deliberate, wild, but meaningful. They didn't imitate the refined traditions of Rome or Egypt, yet appearance still mattered. For the Celts, grooming and adornment showed strength, health, and tribal identity. Even warriors had prized combs. Both Celtic men and women cared about their looks. Burial sites reveal bronze combs, razors, and tweezers, proving that personal grooming held value. Hair was seen as sacred, often worn long and wavy. It was styled with lime or animal fat to create volume and hold, giving warriors the famous spiked or swept back look that unnerved enemies. Perhaps the most famous aspect of Celtic appearance was rhoda blue dye from the Asatis tinctoria plant. Warriors painted swirling blue patterns on their bodies and faces to scare foes and for spiritual or ritual purposes, while scholars debate how widespread its use was. Roman writers like Julius Caesar described it as fearsome. Jewelry was essential not just for decoration, but for showing identity and status. Elaborate torque-neck rings made of twisted gold or bronze were worn proudly by both sexes. Earrings, bracelets, and hairpins added to their appearance. These items symbolized strength, ancestry, and social standing. Makeup was more subtle, but still present. Red ochre was used on cheeks and lips, mostly by high-ranking women. Body paint and tattoos may have been used to mark life milestones, tribal roles, or spiritual meaning. Animal symbols were important in Celtic beliefs, and some body art likely reflected these connections. Mirrors polished bronze discs with detailed backs were found in the graves of elite women, showing that appearance had both social and spiritual importance. For the Celts, beauty wasn't about attraction. A well-groomed warrior was seen as disciplined, a finely adorned woman, wise and strong. Their concept of beauty honored both the land and the spirits they believed lived within it. Across ancient cultures, beauty didn't stop with death. It continued into the afterlife. From the embalmed faces of Egyptian mummies to the perfumed Roman dead, cosmetics weren't only about status or charm. They were sacred acts, tributes to the gods, signs of dignity, and expressions of identity carried beyond life. In ancient Egypt, this belief was especially clear. The dead were buried with makeup palettes, coal containers, and scented oils placed carefully beside figurines and amulets. Why? Because looking good in the afterlife was important. Tomb paintings show the dead with makeup, rosy cheeks, styled wigs, and perfectly lined eyes. Beauty was eternal. Cosmetics were as vital as food and water for the journey into the next life. The Romans also cared about appearance in death. Noble Romans prepared the body with myrrh, cinnamon, and spikenard. These scented oils preserved the body and masked decay, but also raised the deceased to a godlike image. Roman funerals were public events. A well-prepared corpse brought honor to the whole family. Among the Greeks, the body was washed, dressed in fine clothes, and decorated with oils and flowers. Mirrors, combs, and beauty tools were buried with women, especially among the wealthy. These items were not about vanity, but memory. They told the story of who the person had been: elegant, respected, and in tune with divine beauty. In Mesopotamia, oils and incense were used to anoint the dead as part of sacred rituals. These substances were believed to protect the body from evil spirits and help ensure a smooth journey to the afterlife. Death wasn't seen as the end of beauty, but a transformation into something eternal. Even in prehistoric graves, red ochre was sprinkled over the dead, possibly symbolizing blood, rebirth, or life energy. This suggests that the urge to decorate and sanctify the body in death is as old as human civilization. Across time and culture, cosmetics connected the human and the divine. In life, they brought splendor. In death, they gave meaning. Beauty wasn't temporary, it was everlasting. Beneath the busy rhythm of Istanbul, the call to prayer, fairy horns on the Bosphorus, and tourists racing between mosques and market stairs. A hidden quiet. Step down a stone stairway, and the air shifts, cooler, damp, and echoing. Suddenly, the city disappears, and the basilica cistern surrounds you. Built in the 6th century under Emperor Justinian I. The basilica cistern, called Yere Beytun Sarnik in Turkish, is the largest surviving underground water reservoir from the Byzantine Empire. It's a vast, quiet, cathedral-like space filled with water, over 300 feet long and 200 feet wide. It once stored up to 80,000 cubic meters of water, enough to supply the Great Palace and nearby buildings. But this wasn't just a water tank. The Byzantines built even their infrastructure with grandeur. The cistern is supported by 336 marble columns, each about 9 meters tall, arranged in 12 neat rows. The vaulted ceiling they hold makes the space feel like a submerged cathedral. Reflections ripple across the floor. You feel as if you've entered an underworld, lit only by water and soft lights. The water came from the distant Belgrade forest, brought in by aqueducts stretching for miles. Water was vital in Constantinople. The city endured countless sieges. When aqueducts were cut and fountains ran dry, the basilica cistern kept the city alive from below. After the Ottoman conquest in 1453, the cistern was forgotten. Its entrances were sealed, its purpose lost. Locals spoke of strange, damp basements, some even fished from their floors. In the 16th century, a scholar, guided by rumors of hidden water, rediscovered it. Today, the Basilica Cistern is not just a feat of engineering, it's a haunting reminder of a once great empire, a place where time seems to drip from the ceiling, where the ghosts of emperors wander among the pillars. To truly grasp the Basilica Cistern, you must understand its builder Emperor Justinian, a ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire in the 6th century. Justinian didn't just want to protect Rome's legacy, he aimed to surpass it. He built churches, courts, aqueducts, and walls, a lasting message carved in stone. Rome lives on. That Constantinople was the new Rome was not just a belief, was built into the city's foundation. Beneath it, Justinian constructed a marvel no one would see, the Basilica Cistern. Its construction began around 532 CE, shortly after the Nika riots had destroyed much of the city. In the ruins that followed, Justinian ordered the building of a new underground reservoir, one that would serve the rebuilt imperial palace and endure siege and fire. It was both a practical measure and a political statement. Constantinople would never run dry, and the emperor would remain strong. The cistern was built on the site of an old basilica, which gave it its name. It required massive effort. Thousands of workers, including prisoners of war, carved out a space nearly the size of a cathedral beneath the ground. The finished structure measured 138 by 64 meters and was supported by 336 columns, many of them reused materials or spolia taken from earlier Roman and Greek buildings. Reusing old columns was not only efficient, it was symbolic. Justinian was physically building a new empire on the remains of the old. Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian capitals appear side by side, reflecting how Rome's legacy had been absorbed and reshaped beneath Constantinople. The engineering was remarkable. Vaulted ceilings distributed weight evenly. Brick walls were sealed with thick mortar to keep water in. Arched supports prevented collapse. Most importantly, the cistern was supplied by the Valens and Hadrian aqueducts, some stretching more than 19 kilometers from the Belgrade forest. This system allowed the reservoir to hold large water reserves ready in case of siege, drought, or fire. But the true brilliance of the cistern lies in its invisibility. It wasn't meant to impress. It stayed hidden. The public never saw it. There were no grand arches or golden mosaics, just quiet function, a hidden rhythm under the city. And yet, for all its silence, it was essentially a response to crisis and chaos. Through every brick, it echoed a single message. Rome still existed, just deeper underground. Step into the Basilica Cistern, and it doesn't feel like a reservoir, it feels like a forgotten temple. A stone forest rises around you, 336 marble columns arranged in perfect rows, their reflections rippling in the dark water. The silence is broken only by the occasional drip from the ceiling, echoing softly through the space. The columns are not identical. That's part of what makes them so striking. Some are smooth, others fluted. Their capitals various. Some have Ionic scrolls, others Corinthian leaves. A few seem improvised. That's because many were spolia recycled from older Roman and Greek structures. It's a blend of different eras inside one space, as though the gods of abandoned temples had been relocated to this quiet, underground chamber. Most columns stand about 9 meters tall, supporting brick arches that make the chamber feel like a sunken cathedral. Over time, the marble, soaked by centuries of moisture, glows faintly under the dim light, soft tones of yellow, gray, and pink flickering like candlelight underwater among these columns. Two are especially notable for their strange beauty: the Tyr column and the Medusa columns. The Tyr column, also called the Weeping column, is carved with swirling patterns that look like peacock feathers or falling drops. Some say it honors the laborers who died during the cistern's construction. A local legend claims that if water drips on you from this column, it brings good fortune, a quiet myth in a place already full of memory. The column's arrangement, 12 rows of 28, was not random. It followed strict symmetry and balance, a key part of Byzantine thinking that blended Roman engineering with Christian symbolism. Even in a place hidden from view, Visual order mattered. The Byzantines saw beauty and function as inseparable. Over time, algae and mineral deposits have softened the carvings. Roots once grew through cracks in the ceiling. Bats lived in the arches. Like water, time wore down everything. Today, walking among the columns feels like drifting through a dream. The world above seems to have forgotten something important, something that still lingers here in the dark dot, in the far northwest corner of the cistern. Under two marble columns lie its most puzzling artifacts. Two massive Medusa heads. One is turned sideways. The other is upside down. There are no inscriptions, no explanations, just two ancient faces partly submerged in water, as if waiting to be understood. Their exact origin is unknown. Scholars believe the heads were taken from a Roman temple or public building and reused during the cistern's construction in the 6th century. They are fine examples of Roman sculpture, detailed, lifelike, and unsettling. Yet here they are, hidden in silence, used simply as bases for columns. It's as if the Gorgon, once a feared figure, was placed beneath the empire she once defied. Why one head is sideways and the other upside down has long puzzled historians. Some believe the positioning was purely practical, to make the blocks fit, but the Byzantines were precise and symbolic. A more likely theory is that the heads were placed this way to remove Medusa's power, to make her image harmless. Others suggest deeper meaning. Medusa as a symbol of rebellion, of fear, of punished strength. To place her beneath the city may have been a quiet message of control, or perhaps a hidden resistance. In Greek myth, Perseus used Medusa's head as a weapon. Even in death, her image was believed to ward off evil. Her face appeared on coins, shields, and buildings. Could her presence in the cistern be protective, meant to guard the sacred water beneath the city? Today, visitors pause in front of the Medusa heads, often silent. The air feels heavier around them. Whether or not one believes in ancient stories, their presence has weight. You don't just look at Medusa in the Basilica Cistern, you feel as if she's looking back. In ancient Constantinople, water meant survival. The city was known for its walls, churches, and imperial courts, but without water, it would have been a golden tomb. The Basilica Cistern was more than architecture, it was a hidden defense. Built beneath the city, it served as a silent safeguard. Through drought, siege, and hardship, the Byzantine capital was surrounded by threats for centuries. This underground reservoir helped it endure. The Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and Crusaders all laid siege to Constantinople. One of the most severe was the Arab siege of 717 to 718 CE, when food and water supplies ran dangerously low for over a year. While aqueducts could be blocked or poisoned, the sealed, pre-stocked underground cisterns ensured the city's survival. Among them, the Basilica Cistern, with its vast capacity, helped supply the imperial palace and nearby areas during those long and desperate months. Water flowed in from the Belgrade forest, more than 19 kilometers away. Elevated aqueducts, notably, the Valens Aqueduct, delivered water into the city. It was then stored in open-air reservoirs and covered cisterns like this one. The Basilica Cistern stood out because it was both roofed and underground, shielded from heat, sunlight, and contamination. At a time when cities could perish from thirst, this was groundbreaking. But water wasn't just a necessity. It carried symbolic meaning. In Byzantine belief and imperial imagery, water represented life, renewal, and divine blessing. Controlling it, especially under siege, sent a clear message: the city still had God's favor. This is why so many of Constantinople's water systems were not only practical, but also beautifully designed. The Basilica Cistern, with its rows of columns and quiet majesty, was a hidden monument to endurance. Even during the fall of Constantinople in 1453, while flames consumed the city above, the waters below remained undisturbed. After the conquest, the cistern was mostly forgotten, sealed off, and unused. But during the final years of the Byzantine Empire, it had fulfilled its purpose. Today, as tourists walk between its columns, few realize they're above one of the city's most vital defenses. Not a wall or a weapon, but something more essential: silence, water, and time. For nearly a century after the Ottomans took Constantinople, the Basilica cistern remained quiet. Ottoman engineers, skilled in their own right, built new fountains and aqueducts to serve the growing city above. The ancient Byzantine water systems, buried and unmarked, slowly faded from memory. There were no signs, no records, no celebrations, only still water beneath the stone. And yet, the cistern refused to vanish entirely. Locals living near Hagia Sophia began noticing strange things. Some claimed their basements were always damp. Others said they could lower buckets through holes in the floor and pull up fresh water. A few even reported catching fish underground. Quiet mystery unfolding beneath the city's busy streets. It wasn't until the 1540s that the cistern was formally rediscovered. Petrus Gillius, a French scholar sent by King Francis I to study ancient texts and monuments in Constantinople, became curious after hearing local stories. Known for asking questions, he followed the clues. Eventually, he found an entrance, likely through a private home, descended into the shadows below. What he found amazed him. A massive underground space, larger than many European cathedrals, filled with water, columns, and echoes. He explored it by boat, using candlelight to navigate. He recorded its layout, sketched the columns, and noted the presence of the mysterious Medusa heads. His writings introduced the Basilica cistern to the wider world, a lost relic of the Byzantines, quietly preserved beneath the Ottoman capital. Still, even after its discovery, the cistern remained largely unused. It served occasionally as a water source, but was left in semi-obscurity. The Ottoman Empire focused on its own new architectural achievements. The cistern, though beautiful, was considered a relic important, but belonging to the past. It would be centuries before the space was drained, cleaned, and opened as a historical site. But thanks to a curious French visitor and a few observant locals, the silent cistern was stirred once again, no longer forgotten, but waiting to be rediscovered. Today, when visitors descend the stairs near Hagia Sophia and enter the Basilica cistern, they don't find a simple ruin. They step into a living monumental space where design, atmosphere, and memory come together. Lit by warm lights and filled with the soft sound of water, the cistern feels more like a place of reflection than a tourist attraction. That wasn't always the case. When Turkish authorities chose to restore and reopen the site in the late 20th century, they found a flooded ruin. Mud, algae, and time had stained the columns. The floor was hidden under water and debris. But the structure had endured earthquakes, fires, wars, and years of neglect, still holding its ceiling high. After careful restoration, walkways were added just above the water's surface. Lighting was designed to highlight the graceful columns and their reflections below. The effect is a space that feels more like a sunken cathedral than a reservoir. It's not surprising that some call it the sunken palace. And in the quiet, you notice the echo. Each step, each whisper, each drop of water carries through the stone like a soft chant. It's calm, reflective, and timeless. That atmosphere has drawn filmmakers and artists from around the world. The Basilica cistern has appeared in movies like From Russia with Love and Inferno, as well as in documentaries and music videos. It's not just a monument, it's a stage. Visitors are often surprised by how emotional the space feels. Children lower their voices. Tourists slow their steps. Even distracted guests stop in front of the Medusa heads, half submerged and brooding in the shadows. There's something about the place that holds attention. It doesn't request reverence, quietly expects it. In recent years, the cistern has also hosted concerts, art shows, and multimedia exhibits. Modern lights and sound reflect off the water, transforming the space into a living canvas. Paradoxically, it may be more alive today than ever once hidden, now illuminated with fresh meaning. From imperial utility to artistic sanctuary, the Basilica cistern has risen again, not through conquest or fame, but through silence, water, and light. In a city where empires have come and gone, water remains. It is Istanbul's oldest and most enduring witness. The basilica cistern is more than just storage. It holds centuries of meaning, not only as a resource, but as a symbol. The Byzantines, and later the Ottomans, understood that water wasn't just for drinking. It symbolized purity, power, and the boundary between this world and the next. In the cistern, water moves slowly. It doesn't rush, and it makes no noise. It ripples and reflects. Light dances across the surface, broken, gentle, and constant. The symmetry of the columns creates a kind of sacred stage. The stillness makes you look inward like a mirror. The cistern reflects not just light, but also history, identity, and myth. In Byzantine theology, water played a key role in rebirth. Baptism, the central Christian ritual, was a passage from death to life, from sin to purity. While the basilica cistern wasn't used for religious ceremonies, its atmosphere suggests a similar in-between space. You descend into the earth, pass through darkness, then into light and silence. It feels like a quiet ritual, unspoken, but clearly sacred. Some scholars suggest the cistern's location near Hagia Sophia and the Great Palace was intentional. It functioned not just as water storage, but as symbolic reassurance. The emperor's court wasn't built on dry ground. It stood above, flowing, living water. Beneath every throne, a river. Beneath every law, reflection. The Ottomans also held water in high regard. Their gardens, palaces, and mosques were centered around fountains and pools. In Islamic tradition, water represents divine mercy. Water features in architecture reminded believers of paradise. Though the basilica cistern was built by the Byzantines, it quietly matched the Ottoman worldview: cool, hidden, and always moving. There's also a deeper, psychological layer. Walking through the cistern brings more than visual awe. It stirs memory, the way light filters through the columns, the quiet footsteps echoing across water, the steady drip from a ceiling that seems to breathe. All of it feels like something ancient remembering itself. This is not a place that demands attention. It waits like water, like history. Today, the basilica cistern is no longer hidden. It stands among Istanbul's top historical sites, a haunting but dignified reminder that the city's true spirit lies not only in its mosques and monuments, but also beneath the surface. Millions descend its stairs each year, not just to study ancient engineering, but to feel time press softly from the walls. In a city full of noise and motion, the cistern remains one of the few places where silence leads. Visitors instinctively lower their voices. Even a camera shutter sounds too loud, yet the space still holds life, not only through the steady stream of tourists, but in how light moves across the surface, in gentle ripples and occasional events that fill the chamber with sound and color. Over the past 2 decades, the cistern has hosted art installations, laser displays, classical music concerts, and immersive sound projects that blend history with modern creativity. Artists and designers treat it not just as a monument, but as a canvas, a sacred venue where history is part of the experience. You don't simply observe the basilica cistern, you move through it, breathe it in. Restoration has been careful, but necessary. The columns have been cleaned, structural supports strengthened, and walkways improved for accessibility. Yet, great effort has been made to preserve its quiet atmosphere, the soft lighting, cool air, and low echo of dripping water. It remains an architectural feat, yes, but also a reminder that infrastructure can be beautiful, mystical. While the modern world often separates function from design, the Byzantines built a reservoir as graceful as a cathedral. That contrast still surprises visitors. Above ground, Istanbul moves with energy. Trams roll past ancient ruins. Vendors sell chestnuts near Roman columns. But just below it all lies the basilica, cistern, unchanged, undisturbed, enduring, that it carries the stories of emperors, engineers, conquerors, and visionaries, all now echoes in the stone. In the cistern, time doesn't move in a straight line. It loops like water turning in a pool. Past and present meet in the silence. And for a brief moment, you're not only in Istanbul, you're in Byzantium, in Constantinople, in a shadow world that never truly disappeared.